room on our platform to background check working individuals, which in turn generates higher revenue for the investor and also is creating safe, affordable housing for our working class neighbors. What I do is consult with people from what is a pad split to, okay, my property is fully ready and I'm ready for the onboarding team. I love talking to experienced investors, brand new investors, really anyone that wants to kind of build generational wealth for their families, create passive income. Shout out to our first host ever who just moved to Valencia, Spain to live off her passive income for Padsplit. So if your dream is like mine to find the best croissant in Paris, the quickest way to get that passive income to support that is through Padsplit, and I would love to help you get there.
Wow, what great tangible advice. If you want that croissant, that's what you want to do. Croissant's one of my mom's favorite food, believe it or not. So fun fact, this is why we get along. Like, this is why I knew this is going to be a good conversation.
Perfect croissant. Perfect croissant.
Well, Blake, tell us a little bit about, I've heard about Padsplit and how much it has grown. I'm even under escrow myself. So for folks that, like, I would personally vouch for Blake. Blake has been instrumental to my partners and I going under escrow for one of his properties, giving us guidance and such specific tactical advice throughout the entire process. Like, Blake, I am forever indebted to you. Thank you so much for being so supportive so far. And if you want to work with Blake, make sure you click on the referral link that I'll put up on a YouTube video and on Apple Podcasts as well, so you can work with the best OG account representative.
Thank you. That is super kind.
I second that.
Okay, turning red. That's super kind. I am proud to be here. When I started back in 2019, we had 300 rooms and we were only in Metro Atlanta. I'm really proud to have seen our growth. We now have surpassed over 8,000 rooms. What's super exciting as it pertains to Houston is that Houston is the first market that we moved into outside of Atlanta. And we had a lot of reasons for going there. We like the price of homes. We like the massive workforce, the size of the homes. There's just a whole lot to really like about Houston. So it was a really natural kind of second market. We are now in Florida, Texas, Las Vegas, Phoenix. I'm probably not going to be able to name them all like I used to with one or two hands because now they don't fit on two hands, which is cool. But yeah, we've grown a lot. We have a team of over 130 people working every day. So on the resident side, 24/7 member support. On the host side, we have people like me to get you started, onboarding, host success teams, and we're actually even building out a portfolio kind of expansion team to help investors to reach their reach their goals faster. Because sometimes it can be hard after you find one to get your second. We want to grease the wheels all the way through the process and support investors, every step of the way to reach whatever their goals may be.
Wow. All right. What an intro. Ryan, you're going to have something to live up to. So, Ryan, let's bring you into the conversation. For people that don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about your background? How did you get involved with Padsplit? And when you described your company to me and my partners, really, really intriguing, really fascinating, and it's almost like a one-stop shop. So I want to make sure you're able to kind of cover all that. So take it away, man.
Yeah, so I've been investing in Houston, and parts of Texas personally since 2011. I started a little real estate investment company out of Austin initially. That went really well. We ended up coming to Houston, and through that process, I learned a lot in the education of it, and when I got to a certain point, I thought, early on I subscribed to this thing. You're only successful as how you make other people successful. And so I started helping other people do real estate through just real estate brokerage, helping them find and identify single family investment properties, little cash flow properties. And, quickly found out over time that I really enjoyed helping other people do what I'd already done, and I'd already paid for the education. So, I did that for a couple years and kind of leaned into this thinking that if I could help people with just the real estate brokerage side of it, that's one thing, but having the whole team is integral to being successful in any investment, right? So having, brokerage, finding the deals, that's one thing. The construction side of it and managing that piece of it, the listing and leasing part, and then the property management side of it as well. So that was when I came up for the ambitious idea to put all those things together and effectively through a network of individuals. My thought was, if we can get enough individual people doing enough volume, we could actually go and hire these teams to where through proxy of the network, one individual now has access to the entire team that's working completely on their goals, completely on their particular projects. So, that's what we've done what we've done. So going on 5 years now. So when I got one to Padsplit through our broker, he was I think on LinkedIn or something, and found it some post, and he told me about it, and he literally called me. He's like, man, these guys are in Atlanta. I think they're coming to Houston soon. This was like March of 2021, I think, Blake, somewhere in there. And so he reached out, I think, to Atticus through LinkedIn. And Atticus put us together with Blake and Frank and that team. And because I had the experience, obviously, of investing in Texas, investing in Houston, I looked at it and I go, man, this is an absolute no-brainer. A part of our charge has always been affordable housing, has always been, to me, the mom and pops who are investing in single-family homes absolutely was something that was attacking that, that epidemic. And what's interesting about Houston, over the past 5 to 10 years, Houston has always been relatively affordable, given the size and given the opportunity. But that's slowly starting to erode. I mean, rents are going up, especially now in the past year. And it's definitely, the opportunity is still there. There's a lot of jobs. There's a lot of growth potential, but it's not as affordable as it used to be. And, I've seen this firsthand, So when Padsplit said they were coming to the market, and I saw, co-living it's an old idea, but nobody ever did it because they weren't able to put it together in a way that was that you're able to actually manage it. It's unbelievable, the platform that they put together. And now it makes co-living and managing co-living for investors and our clients actually possible, where I don't think it really was before Padsplit set out to do this. So
yeah, I think that's really, really cool, man. On your end, you found a new exit strategy, and you said, how do we help people with this wave coming in with a huge affordable housing demand? Absolutely love that, Ryan. So I love that you guys have a brokerage, you guys have some of the construction in-house as well as property management. It's really, it creates less friction, or it just makes the whole process smooth by removing the friction.
Yeah. One of the other things,
people coming in. Yep.
Yeah. To that point, we have all these parts, and everyone knows you need these 4 or 5 things to be able to do real estate investment. But the key thing is that, and Blake can say this, when you're talking about a new model, when you're talking about something as innovative as Padsplit, very few people want to be the first ones to do it. Very few people want to say, yeah, that's a great idea, but what's the data on that? How has that gone? It's like, well, we just started, when we were in Houston, when they first came, it's like, we have Atlanta data, but how many do you have in Houston? Well, the thing about the PIN, the Passive Investor Network, is that it's a network of folks doing these volume, right? But the other part of it is that we have these early adopters. We have these people that see that the risk-reward ratio to this, it makes sense to them, right? And they go, you know what? I trust you guys to put me in a good position, so I'll go ahead and take the leap and be the first one to do this. So now, 2 years later, we have all this data. We have all these learnings. We have all this understanding of what makes a good Padsplit in Houston. We've taken, obviously, all of the fantastic experience that Blake and everybody had in Atlanta. I went there, got to stay in a hotel where I think you got married, right, Blake? Oh, that was the thing, like one of the great hotel. What's the name of the hotel?
It's the Lowe's Hotel.
Shout out to Lowe's Hotel.
Shout out to the Lowe's Hotel
in Midtown in Atlanta. So got to go out there. Heard Frank drove me around, showed me just some incredible models that were early on, and now what they're doing. And so we took that data, took that understanding, and brought it to Houston. But now, over 2 years and almost 200 units, we have the experience to say, look, we know how to do a pad split in Houston. And Houston being that it's very lax in terms of zoning. It's very kind of easy to get, these things approved. And we've gone through that process. It's prime. And Blake can tell you early on, we did a lot of work, and the people on boots on the ground here, the market launchers came in and did a lot of work to get Padsplit, synonymous with co-living like it is in Atlanta.
Yeah, and that's so cool, and I'm so glad you guys were able to pave the path for other investors like myself that's looking into Houston right now, right? So we talked about you guys paving the path, you guys have the experience. Maybe this is a good time, Blake, kind of help the listeners understand some of the data, some of the stats you've been seeing from the Houston market. Let's go through some data if you could, because I know we have audience out there that really want some tangible data that is a little bit more risk averse, but they want to make sure that they have some validation behind why a certain investment thesis would work. So take it away, Blake.
Yeah. So as of today, we have about 640 active bedrooms in Houston, which means there's a third of them basically kind of that Ryan and his team have, contributed to the total market, which is awesome. So when it comes to what operator knows the most about Houston, hands down, it's Ryan. He has a third of them under his belt. So we are, around 640 active rooms. We are at 89% occupancy as of this moment. Of course, we like to be above 90, but it's basically there. Interestingly, we never want to be, we want to be above 90. We don't really ever want to be at like 97%, because if we have no rooms available in a particular part of town, someone's going to think we're not there and they'll never come back. So like 90% is actually sort of our sweet spot. And that's just, 6 rooms or something different. So tomorrow we'll probably be at 90%. So that's great to see. Another sort of stat around Houston is people want to know, okay, so great, you get one person in there. They stay for 6 months or a year or whatever. How long is that room going to be sitting vacant for the next person? The median time for a room to rebook in Houston is 10 days and trending downward. So, somebody moves out on a Monday, the property manager turns the home on a Wednesday. Within, 10 days, and I'm counting the weekend, it's going to be booked again. And then, within a week from when they book, they're going to move in. So, 2 weeks or less is the median of what we're seeing of how long one room, isn't occupied, which is great because you want to have, your rooms filled as often as you can. So that's a great statistic. Another thing I'll call out is that across the board, our eviction rate is about 3% and trending downwards. In Houston, of the 645 rooms, there are literally 2 pending evictions. So that is like what, 1/3% of an eviction rate. In the world of Class C, the normal is like 6%. So I can't do that math, but like, what is that? Like 1/18 of the average eviction rate is what we're seeing.
Is that 2 evictions across 3 years or just like in 1 year right now? I want to make sure.
Right now, there's 2 pending evictions.
Okay. Wow. That's crazy though. That's still very, very, very low.
Yeah. Right. So that's an amazing stat. I think the other thing just about Houston is that there are just so many pockets that make sense. You have the universities, you have the oil and gas, you have the, normal just Walmart, hospitals, schools, the things that exist everywhere. So yeah, I think, and then of course we love the zoning. The trade-off on the zoning is that neighborhoods that would maybe never have an HOA in most cities have an HOA. So that's what is so important about using local experts like Ryan's team to source the properties to make sure that you're set up for success from the beginning. Let's see, what else should I share about Houston?
I think for people that don't know Padsplit, right, you guys have sort of this core market, and you also briefly talked about what the attainable occupancy is. Maybe you just help explain like what is the core market? What does that mean when you're in a core market for Padsplit? Let's go with that.
A core market means you get the full suite of services. So in addition to the things like member screening, collections, and our amazing technology that you'll get anywhere, you also have boots on the ground. So like Ryan mentioned, the market launchers that live in Houston, they are there stoking the fires. They are going to job centers and job fairs to help find people to stay in the houses. They're going to events to meet with investors. They are training local vendors on how to do things the Padsplit way, so that someone like you, who's nowhere near Houston, can rely on the experts that we've created, the experts that we've trained. Another big thing is paid marketing. So if you were to type in room for rent Houston, we're paying out the yin yang to Google to be on the top of the search results. If you were in a non-core market like Omaha, Nebraska, you're not going to receive that paid marketing. So that rebook time is probably not going to be 10 days. Let's see.
Well, that's a great point, because I think people underestimate why you're paying a Padsplit fee, right? One, it's like they're paying a lot of money to help market your room. It's the brand awareness with that population that gets you and your room's occupied, versus you trying to do and market this stuff on Craigslist on your own and trying to vet every single tenant. I think that's a really, really important clarification there, and for people to understand what the benefit is of teaming up with you guys. So let's maybe talk about, like, you have some data. Like, are there any zip codes or neighborhoods that you see as the best performer that across the Padsplit data that you have access to? It's
hard because Houston is just like pocket by pocket by pocket. It's hard to just, I wish I just had, one, great answer. But let's see. What did my market launcher tell me? So, for example, Northeast Houston, we have some properties that are like constantly 100% filled and have good room rates, but then 3 miles, to the west, where it's still, North Houston, maybe they aren't doing as well. Interestingly, Pasadena, Texas is an area I really like. It's by the Houston Hobby Airport. One of the top performing areas in Atlanta is also by the Atlanta Airport. So I think like tapping into kind of all the airport employees that are working a lot, have really tough hours, like shifts that start at 4 a.m. or end at 4 a.m. The proximity, I think, is really great. I wish I could say like Northeast Houston is great, Southwest Houston is terrible. It's just a little bit more, more nuanced. And the more rooms we get on the platform, the deeper our understanding can be on that.
Yeah, well, that's great. So let's bring in Ryan, because Ryan, I want to bring you in and talk to you about, we just got some tangible advice and tactically research advice from Blake about, staying near the airport, which makes a lot of sense when you think about it. So Ryan, let's dig into your expertise, because you have over a third of the supply in Houston in your purview. What neighborhoods or areas are you seeing to be the top performers?
I want to real quick though, on the Padsplit, the marketing piece of it. This is the thing that I don't know. If you're a sophisticated investor, you think about what are the kind of the harder things to do. And it's marketing and the tenant management. And that's Padsplit literally does that. And when we started out, I thought, when I was telling, my membership base about this program, I go, look, these guys are well-funded. They're well, educated relative to their experience. They know how to fill these things. And because that was always the question, like, who's going to live in these and how are they going to do that? I go, man, that's something we don't have to worry about. We have to worry about this, figuring out where we could put them. So I just wanted to kind of dovetail on what Blake was saying relative to the service that they provide. Not only the platform itself, right, but the marketing. And like she said, they're spending a ton of money to put properties in our investors, or put individuals in our investors' properties. Like that, I mean, what model out there do you have that is what's happening? There isn't one. That doesn't exist in nature. So I just wanted to kind of, swing on that. Here's the deal about Houston. Yes, we don't have zoning, right? That's awesome, because it is a completely free and relatively efficient market. And it moves in a different way than areas that have zoning. So like Blake was talking about, you go to Northeast Houston, right? Well, this pocket, I mean, we can't have enough rooms there. They're getting booked. Their rates are higher, all this. And then you think, well, it's proximity to this little pocket is a few miles away. Not so much. It is literally almost street by street because of this kind of phenomenon that happens with no zoning. It's it's capitalism at its pure finest, and you kind of have to predict where things are moving. And that's really, I mean, for me in my career, and not only in pad splits, but just your typical single family properties, that's kind of what I based it on, because I've seen this, time and time again. And this factor has become pretty predictable, in terms of where things are moving. And what I've always thought is a lot of people will go to the market that's already kind of turned, that's already kind of been, already kind of running and gunning and juicing, kind of speaking back to my earlier comment about, you don't want to be the first one. You don't want to be the first one in a market. You want to basically take what they've already done. And I mean, that works. But for us, we want to find value in areas that are maybe adjacent, that are popping a little bit later. So my thought was always, if I can get in an emerging market and I could basically right size the math on, okay, this property, the math of it makes sense today. And if the market doesn't go up, the market doesn't, pop like we think it's going to do, that's fine. We're holding some real estate in a decent area. We're cash flowing it. Everything's cool. But if it does pop, if it does transition, if it does get that lift in that particular submarket, man, we're off to the races. When I went out to Atlanta, the story was always like, this is one of our better performing pad splits. This neighborhood used to be, what I think it was Pittsburgh. I think it was what it was called. Like it was basically zoned, or basically how many times they mentioned the neighborhood in Outkast songs, right? That was kind of the piece of it. And it came to a point where it was like, this area transitioned and this pad split kind of grew through that process. I want to be in those markets. I want to be in those areas because we're early in this. So relative to that, I could pop up the map and kind of show you, where it is. And to Blake's point, Houston, it's spread out. So let's
do it.
Let me show you.
Let's have you. So for the listeners out there right now, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or on your phone or in your car, definitely check us out at youtube.com/@Kent_he, because we're going to have Ryan we're going to go into the details, because this is where we don't, on this podcast, we're a little different. We don't just talk concepts and theories. We're actually going to get into the specifics so that you all have something tangible to walk away with, just like how Blake was giving us very specific numbers earlier. And this is why you want to work with someone on Blake. So make sure you click that referral link. But Ryan, take it away. I see your screen up now. Just for the people that are listening in the car, if you could just verbalize a little bit better for the audience about like what neighborhoods you might be referring to. Tell us why it's a great neighborhood.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. I mean, we already talked about Pasadena. So Pasadena, Texas, not only is it near the airport, but it's also just west of a lot of the industry. If you look over here to Pasadena, there's the airport. Here's Pasadena down just outside. This is our second loop. It's called the Beltway. And Pasadena is right down just on the southeast side of Houston. And if you keep kind of rolling a little bit further east, you'll see the Houston Ship Channel, which is like one of the top 3 shipping areas in the country. Basically, if you filled your car with gas today, it probably came from the Houston Ship Channel. So, what is also over here, and I don't want to zoom out too much, is tons of chemical plants, tons of refineries, things like that. So in terms of the workforce, this whole area from Baytown all the way back down to Pasadena is just kind of ripe for Padsplit, for those types of workers that are living in those properties. So that's definitely something in the kind of lower southeast part of Houston. One of the areas where it's had tremendous growth over the past probably 5-6 years. Well, for a lot longer than that, but like in the most recent times in the neighborhoods around this is the Texas Medical Center. I mean, it's for sure one of the largest and best medical centers in the country. And for Padsplit, we have whole houses that are adjacent to this where it's all traveling nurses, quite a bit, especially during the end of the pandemic, the tail end. So that's kind of on the almost directly south of Houston is the medical center, and most of those properties, that's 77051, 77021, 77033, in that kind of market area, which basically spans between, if you're familiar with Houston, the South Loop, and all the way to the Beltway, down 288 on the south side, 45 on the east side, and then up to South Main, which is 90 on the west side. So this probably was the first market that was submarket that we entered into with a handful of properties, Brookfield being one of them, which was one of our first. That's one piece of it, where the medical center is obviously drawing a lot of those bookings. But really, on the other side of 288, you have the university. So Texas Southern University, and then University of Houston, which has just entered the Big 12. It's growing leaps and bounds. That's just out here on the southeast side of downtown. So this little pocket and those zip codes that I just mentioned, I mean, we're talking some massive growth. The other piece of it is for this particular submarket, when we're kind of drilling down on where we want to identify a good place for a Padsplit, public transit. Now, Houston is for sure not known for its public transit, but we do have Metro, and we do have it is serviceable, right? So when we're looking at a Padsplit, we always want to be about a half mile away from the nearest bus stop. And so when you're talking about this submarket, there is a ton of inventory if we're doing remodels in this area that are well within a half mile of a bus stop. The other thing, and Blake mentioned this, is HOAs. These areas are historically kind of older areas, and they don't have the challenges of like maybe a little further out in the suburb type areas where they have HOAs, mandatory HOAs that have a lot of rules and can give you a lot of, could be a lot of friction around having a co-living property in those neighborhoods. These areas, and we've kind of, it's neighborhood by neighborhood, but we've kind of identified where, and we've done a lot of due diligence because it's not always easy to find these HOAs because like I said, some of these neighborhoods are 60, 70, 80 years old. So finding the deed restrictions and rules takes a little bit of digging. And so we've basically gone zip code for zip code and neighborhood for neighborhood on a lot of these markets, kind of identifying where, the voluntary HOAs are, the mandatory HOAs, and the properties and neighborhoods that don't have any HOAs. The other piece of it is if you're going to remodel a property in Atlanta, or Padsplit remodel a property in Atlanta, it's a little bit different because you have basements, and so that kind of lends itself to being able to do that. Here, we're basically, it's flat, and you can see behind me, it's just flat. And it's prone to flood zones in some of these areas. So we can't have a basement, obviously, but we have to look for properties that have enough square footage, whether we are, taking the existing property or whether we're converting a garage, something along those lines. We have to make sure that there's enough space in those properties that, in order to do the Padsplit remodel. And then the last piece of it is parking. Houston for sure does have a public transit system, but Houston's a tough town to live in if you don't have a car. So we have to make sure that we have at least 50% of our rooms have 50% parking. So if it's 10 rooms, we have 5 parking spots or more. So that includes a driveway, which will typically have 4 spots, or some on the street parking, which we can usually get a couple of spots out of that. So that's definitely, when we're talking about these little sub markets. I think when Blake is talking about what makes a great Padsplit, and then a few miles away maybe it's not as good, it's those kind of driving factors along those lines. So this little market here on the south side of town, the northeast side is a little bit different in that there's not as much specific industry like it is on the southeast side. So on the north side, you have the kind of probably about 45 minutes from downtown, you have the international airport, George Bush International Airport. But you kind of have this in between where it's dicey where you're kind of locating these properties. So you have to be really specific about where it's going to be. Again, public transportation, because some of these northern lying areas, they don't have that public transportation. The metro doesn't go that far out. So you need to be kind of mindful of that when you're looking at it. Then the other piece of it is there's 59 and 45, and then again 610. This is the north side of that loop. So when you're talking about where kind of people would like to be, not just for jobs, but for restaurants, entertainment, that sort of thing, kind of the central area. The Heights is kind of the cool place to be on the north side. So anything adjacent to that, one of our best properties is just north of the Heights, where probably about, I don't know, maybe a 15-minute walk, there's a Whole Foods. So obviously when Whole Foods goes in a neighborhood, property values are probably going up, and it's going to be a good area to invest in if you can get ahead of that. So those areas up that way. And
for the Heights, are you talking about like the Greater Heights, Woodland Heights, Houston Heights? Because I'm just trying to follow along with you to make sure that the audience can follow.
Yeah, so you have Greater Heights, Independence Heights. This is the thing about Houston, is because the Heights is so, kind of the neato place to be, everything adjacent has now named itself the Heights, even neighborhoods that were never the Heights. It's like, oh, I live in the Heights. I'm like, yeah, no, you really don't. But so the Greater Heights, and then you have, which is kind of the central area there. Then you have Independence Heights. But when you get kind of past that, you have Northside, Acres Homes, and then that's going straight north from there. To the east of there, one area that I've loved, since I came back to Houston 10 years ago and started doing real estate in Houston from Austin, was near Northside, because it kind of reminded me, if you know Austin at all, kind of East Austin, the culture of that, the kind of the feel of that neighborhood. But they've just put through near Northside recently our first rail that's kind of going up, and it's actually going to go all the way up to Intercontinental Airport, and it comes down through downtown, through the medical center, and then through the university area. So that's kind of expanding. So we're really, really hot on that area. Fifth Ward. I got to say something about Fifth Ward. So East Houston, historically, and as you can see, it's always been kind of industrial. Not a lot of residential there.
Could you zoom in really quick on the Fifth Ward? I want to make sure the people on YouTube is also paying attention. There we go. Yeah,
so Fifth Ward is on the northeast side, direct northeast, adjacent from downtown. So for those that can see, you have the Buffalo Bayou, and this bayou actually goes to the Houston Ship Channel. So there's a lot of industry along the lines there. Well, what's happened in recent years is those industries have kind of moved out to the suburbs and moved a little further east if they're on the Ship Channel. And these large, and this is something that I think is really unique to Houston, these large parcels of land that were industry are now being kind of developed and built up by developers to have like these really cool mixed use areas where you have venues, concert venues, you have restaurants, you have workspace. Because I think a lot of people now, where you're kind of working from home, you want to kind of be in the mix along those lines, to where you have kind of it's a little bit more walkable to these places. So they're developing right here along what's called East End or Edo, of down East. Edo is East Downtown. They're building what's called the East River Project. So it's going to kind of span from the east side of downtown all the way down the Buffalo Bayou. So Fifth Ward is kind of prime for this resurgence because, I mean, this area that they're putting in there is going to be, it's basically going to kind of be the place to be at East Houston, kind of where you have these venues, these restaurants, and a lot of cool stuff going on. So we're doing interior infill, build to rent townhomes in these areas, and I think it's absolutely ripe for Padsplit.
I love everything that you have talked about, Ryan, because I think if I were to just summarize everything, first of all, we went through the east side, going across, really following your sources of employment. You had the chemical plants, and you went on to the airport in the south. Then you had the medical centers down in the south part, but then you had this really interesting location that's kind of smacking between the medical center and also the airport. So tons of employment out there. But I love your point about parking, where you want to make sure you have parking spots for at least half the folks, especially as you go north, where you pointed out earlier, where there's a rail being built, but there's not necessarily a rail there yet. Correct me if I'm wrong. But then you also have this other spot where you talked about, hey, you got to know these pockets. Sometimes the signs of development is sort of the best signs of an indication for path of progress. Maybe now that we talked about so many of the great areas, is there, and we have to ask this, right? Is there any spots that you should definitely avoid, like bad areas, lots of crime, etc., that you can kind of educate the folks on? Because that's some investors' number one fear, right? Especially if they're investing out of state. Yeah, I have Ryan gave me some guidance with some data, but man, how do I really know that I'm not buying in a really, really bad area that no one wants to live?
Yeah, I think that ultimately, when you're looking at where to put a Padsplit in Houston, if you stick to these areas, like I said, that have those kind of those features, right? The public transit, kind of adjacent to some other development, you're going to kind of avoid that. So like in Northeast Houston, for instance, when you start, if you go up north 59 here, if you get probably 2 to 3 miles away, east of that road, it starts to become a little bit less desirable, because there isn't that public transportation. There isn't a lot of kind of development adjacent. And if you get like 4 or 5 miles out, it kind of becomes a little bit more rural. So it really kind of takes out of the things in my mind that make a Padsplit successful, which is kind of, more inner city type living, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I want to kind of get to the next question. I think this has been super, super valuable information here, Ryan. I've talked to you briefly, and I know that you guys have agents, construction folks inside your company, and property managers. But you guys, interestingly enough, are moving towards new construction. And now this is interesting because I saw some of your plans and your specs, and I was like, this is really interesting. So I want to hear from you why you decided to go pursue that model. And just for folks that can't picture it, right? I was looking at a plan where there's 8 bedrooms and 8 bathrooms, like all private ensuite rooms. That's like super, super, niche, but then dedicated towards this exit strategy specifically. So Brian, give us your thought process, then I'll bring Blake in to kind of talk about like what she's seeing as the best performing Padsplits and why she thinks they're doing so well there.
Yeah, so it kind of stemmed from our initial findings on the single family side. So if we're identifying these submarkets that are transitional, right, we can kind of pick and choose. Like I was saying on the Padsplit side, we have to find a very specific type of property in order to be able to remodel it and Padsplit. And it's got to flow. It's got to be a certain type of a property. We have to work with what's there. And a lot of these markets that I've kind of identified today, those properties are not, they're older houses. So they're like 1,000, 1,100 square feet. And so what we were doing on a handful of properties, we were actually expanding those properties. We were adding square footage to those properties relative to the Padsplit model. So it made sense that, the thinking was, okay, if we can get these plans approved, we can get Houston to say, okay, we're cool with what you're doing here. It gave us a lot of optionality if we were, not having to take an existing structure. So, for instance, you mentioned with the data that we have on in-suite properties, which was kind of Blake and Frank's, brainchild when we started doing these properties. We would I think we were doing 4 rooms to 1 bathroom that was shared, and then 2 suites in every property to kind of see what the market would take on that, because it looked like it was a good model or a good product, excuse me. And man, that's absolutely fleshed itself out. So on average, I think a normal shared room rents for like $150, $160 a week across Houston. The average, I think, stay is about 8 months in those rooms, in those shared rooms. Where in a suite with private bathroom, and we also put closets in every room too, which, without going into it, I think that's a valued feature too. The suites rent for $250, $245 on average a week, and the average member stays 12 to 14 months, I think is roughly, and those things, I think the occupancy, where 10 days was the number for a shared room for once a room gets turned and then it gets booked within 10 days. On a suite, that's 1.5 days. Yeah.
Wow, that's fast.
No, it's insane. I mean, clearly, if you're thinking about wanting to live in a Padsplit, I mean, would you rather have your own bathroom, your own kind of space? I mean, that levels it up in that way for what is still very, very affordable housing relative to the market if you wouldn't have to get an apartment along those lines. But the other piece of it is, Kent, is that now, because we're building from the ground up, we can be very, very diligent on and very discerning on where we are putting these things. We're not kind of handcuffed to, well, this property's kind of on the edge, but it meets our needs and it checks 4 of the 5 boxes. No, we can go and we can actually say, this is where we want to put Padsplits. This is where we have identified that the Padsplit model is going to work the best. And we literally can build from the ground up. And because we're building from the ground up, we can actually design this to be a very efficient Padsplit. Open kitchen and open dining concepts, our parking situation, we can roll with that. And then the rooms themselves, making them optimal and at the end of the day, way more marketable.
Yeah, so you just talked a lot about the benefits, right? 1, higher rental rates for these ensuite rooms, better occupancy, which naturally keeps your biggest expense, which is vacancy, down.
Yeah.
Now, what is the cost difference? Like, how much does a Padsplit remodel cost compared to a new construction cost? Can you give some rules of thumb there that the investors that listen to this call can kind of take away?
Yeah, I have a very, very basic, very easy way to do that. When we're talking about per room, if we went and identified an existing property and we're going to remodel it to the PIN standard of what we're doing, you're probably about $30,000 per room. So if you have 10 rooms, that's a $300,000 property, including acquisition and construction, and then also the Padsplit furnishings, things like that, right? So you're invested about $30,000 per room. And like I said, we'd probably do 2 suites and the rest would be shared rooms. So you could do the math on the averages there and the ROI that could be expected along those lines. Now, those are still insane returns. I mean, let me be really clear. Like those are still really, really good numbers, even when you factor in, maintenance and vacancy and utilities and Padsplit fees, all those things. You're still getting a 10 to 15%, ROI, cash on cash on those properties, levered, right? If you're getting a loan for part of it. On the new build side, we're looking at probably anywhere from $40,000 to $45,000 per room, which is, it's a little bit of a jump, but relative to the fact that you're going to be getting suites the entire time and the efficiencies of that, it starts to make a lot of sense. The other piece of it is, and this is where kind of I get into my, my assumption phase, is the places in which we can put these new builds are so. I think the opportunity is so exciting that, like I said earlier, we're going to put them in. We're going to stress them. Current market, 245 average, whatever the case may be on these suites. But I think there's a lot of room to run as those areas start to transition and as they start to kind of develop a little more.
Oh, this is interesting. So 30 grand roughly, that's a great rule of thumb for investors to take into account, and 40 to 45 grand for a new build. But technically you would think you get higher rental rates, but then you should also get lower vacancy and you should have lower maintenance at the same time because it's a brand new build.
That's a good point.
What terms because most investors, they might be used to buying a conventional deal, right? Last question for you before I move to Blake. Yeah. What can investors expect to see for loans for new construction? Like, how does that differ? Are they drawing on a specific time? Are they buying it all up front? Like, how does that process work at a high level?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have several strategic partners that when we launched out and we started doing new construction, lending was a little bit scarce along those lines for individuals. But because now, again, we have the network, we have the experience, we can actually show these lenders, hey, this is what our investors have done. We've been able to get a handful of those folks. And because they're not stressing it relative to the risk of kind of not knowing, the way that bankers do, we can actually show them what the risk factors are. We show them what the historical data is. We've gotten better rates on some of these things, a little bit better leverage relative to if we were remodeling. So the math of it is about the same as what you would do on like a hard money type loan on a normal property, but where you're including the acquisition, you're including the construction costs, right? Which is usually 70% of what the value of that property is going to be. After it's already fixed. So you could do the math on what your leverage is there. On the construction side, it's a loan to cost. So meaning that if your cost is $100,000, typically it's a 90% loan to cost. So if your cost is $100,000, they're going to loan you $90,000. The caveat is they go back to that 70% LTV. So it's got to basically, it's got to meet that 70%. So it's the lesser of the two, 90% loan to cost or 70% loan to value, if that makes sense. So yes. The cool thing about that is that you've now typically when you close on that loan, you have purchased the property so that we could start the phase of planning. We get submitted to the city, which usually takes about 2 or 3 months. To get those approved. And as you're doing that, your construction money is escrowed. So every dollar that you'll need to complete this project is escrowed in the bank. So once we get the plans approved, then the construction team obviously will start the construction process. And we do probably, depending on the client, depending on their kind of risk tolerance factors, we do anywhere from 4 to 6, 7, 8 draws. we can spread that out to kind of make it a little more palatable along those lines, because it's kind of money in, money out on the cash flow. On our, and just kind of to tell you, on our calculator, when we calculate these things and we actually present these to our clients, we're rolling through this in very detailed where you're going to be out of money, where you're investing money, and kind of the calculus of how that rolls out cash flow wise. So what happens is we go in and let's say we've done 5 draws. So we do 20% of the work. Typically the bank comes out, inspects that work, makes sure that it's been done, releases those funds. Now we do another 20%, kind of on and on and on. What we've done is we've broken it out into the 5 draws, but we also have 2 phases where what we'll do is once the property is complete, we'll do phase 2, which is basically getting it Padsplit ready so that you can actually refinance that property, get into a long-term loan with a lower interest rate along those lines. And then within a month to 6 weeks, we have it on platform. Padsplit's doing their thing, getting this thing filled, which takes, a roughly 4 to 6 weeks to do, getting it occupied, and then you're off to the races.
Man, and that's such a good process. Thank you for going through the level of detail that you did, because I think this gives the audience very, very good clarity into what it might take. Sure, there is a higher return theoretically, but it comes with a longer lead time. So that's something all investors just got to really be mindful of and really say, hey, does this fit my investment strategy? Do I want to have my credit tied up on this, right? So you got to talk to your lenders and make sure that they're working, and also reach out to Ryan if this is something that you're really interested in. But
the first thing we do, I want to say, Kent, real quick, the first thing we do is we go, what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? Because a lot of people, and I'll say this on this platform, a lot of people go out and buy real estate without having any goals. They just think real estate's a great idea, and that's true. But if you don't have a goal, if you don't know where you're trying to get to, you can't afford decisions along the way. So the first thing that we do at Penn is we have a portfolio advisor that goes through and puts a 5-year plan together and says, here's year 1, here's year 2, here's year 3, so that we're laser focused on whatever that end goal piece is, so that when we're looking at the math of it, we understand what the decisions need to be relative to the goal.
Yeah, and I love that. That's like the perfect segue, right? Because the goal now can be, Blake, what should some of our top performers look like? And I think you can probably provide some of the best color here, Blake.
So I do just want to go one thing that you guys were talking about before when you're talking about the benefits of doing an 8-bedroom, 8-bathroom. So like all of the things you said, absolutely. But like another thing is just member experience. A lot of our residents are coming from extended stay motels, which we know are often not clean, not safe, but they do have their own private bathroom. So sometimes getting over the fact of sharing a bathroom can be a hurdle to moving people in. The other thing I'll say is that the 3 things that impact member tenure the most are move-in experience, responsiveness to maintenance tickets, but also cleanliness of the home. Now, do I love going into my bathroom and seeing my husband's little beard shavings? No, but at least like he's my husband. Like if you don't have to share a bathroom with anyone, like that is like the main place other than the kitchen that you're going to be upset about cleanliness. Even just in a normal Padsplit, when you're sharing a bathroom, you have, you're bringing your shampoo and conditioner and your towel, you can't leave anything in the bathroom. If you have your own bathroom, like you can make that your moment of zen for the day. So I think that like the member experience piece with the private bathrooms can't be like overstated enough. So I just really wanted to hit that point. As far as, when you're going to do a Padsplit, really just like what should you do? You should put yourself in the shoes of the member. Like you have to have a bed. Now, could you put like a 2-inch mattress in the room? You could, but like, do you want to sleep on that? No, you don't. So like, remember that these are hardworking people. A lot of them have, service jobs. They're on their feet all day, or they're lifting heavy stuff all day. Like make their room a place of refuge and comfort. Like you have to have a place to unpack. So you could just have a closet, but like, where are people going to put their gym shorts and socks? Like think about what it would be like to like live in the room. Our minimum required square footage is 80 square feet, but would you, like instead of maybe squeezing in as many 8x10 rooms as you can, maybe have a 10x10 room and have a few less, just thinking about the member experience is just really important. When rooms are bigger and, everybody, that expression, everything's bigger in Texas. When you do have larger rooms, thinking about, we don't want to have couches and we don't want to have love seats. They get stained. You don't want to have a friend over, all that. But like maybe throw a desk in the room because, maybe whether someone's a part-time student or just it's a place to prop up their computer while they're watching, Netflix or whatever's going on. It's just really think about the resident experience, you need to have artwork on the wall. You want to make it be welcoming. Ryan does a really cool thing where he partners with like a local school and buys artwork from the school and then like puts it up in the rooms, which I think is just like a really nice touch. So just like the biggest thing is to think about what would you want if you were staying in the room?
Yeah. And I think that's such a great point. It's also artwork, things that makes the picture a little bit more nice, a little bit more homey, a little bit more inviting. That's how you stand out from your competition. Don't forget, there's 600 rooms in Houston, but if I were to do this, I will want my spot to be the best because why do something if you don't want to be the best at it? That's just kind of like my personal investment thesis. So that's really interesting. I love all of the little gems that you put in, which is why you guys should definitely work with Blake by clicking the referral link. But Blake, this is a question that I kind of ask everybody that comes on a podcast. I want to see if your answers change. Why do you think affordable housing, particularly the lack of supply of affordable housing, is so hard to solve for?
Well, I think because historically the incentives for investors just haven't been there. It's not, the juice isn't worth the squeeze to do a traditional, affordable housing unit. It's also harder to get government tax relief to build affordable housing. It used to be a little bit easier. I think it's okay for an investor to be primarily focused on profit. I mean, that's their business. We're all business people. But when you are primarily focused on Padsplit or on profit, without Padsplit, affordable housing isn't going to get you there if your goal is just making as much money as possible. So I think that's a big piece of it. I think also there's a little bit of some people feel like there's a stigma on people that might need affordable housing. And I just think that's really unfortunate because you just don't really know what people's life circumstances have been. Maybe they're the first person in their country, in their family to come over to America and they're trying to build a better life. Or maybe they had to, drop out of high school in 9th grade to take care of their family or their siblings. It doesn't mean they don't deserve a nice place to stay. And I think it's just like a lack of awareness of these, all the people that we're interacting with all the time, not having a safe place to stay. And then if you do know and you want to do something about it, feeling like it's this massive problem and how are you going to tackle it? I think what's so cool about Padsplit is that it gives an individual agency to like really make the world a better place and take care of the bottom line.
Oh, that is just so beautifully said. I think with affordable housing, this is why we start this podcast. So if people can understand like, hey, there's so many different avenues to invest in affordable housing, from single family, mom and pop, Section 8 landlord to something with a little bit more higher yield, like a Padsplit. But you are still helping folks, especially for hardworking immigrant families, like someone like my mom that, she lived there were 9 of us in a 2-bedroom apartment. Here, this is a step up because everybody gets their own rooms. And it's like you get independence from that perspective. You have freedom to build a solid foundation for your family. And I think people just discount the fact that there are very many hardworking folks in America that deserve a stable home to grow up in, close to their employment location, so they're not spending all that money on gas, so that they can actually have some money left over to save up for their family. So I really appreciate that answer. That's a really, really well said answer, Blake. I love it. Ryan, let's bring you in. Why do you think affordable housing is so hard to solve for, particularly around the lack of supply?
I think first and foremost, and Blake touched on this, the first question I get is who lives in these places? There's such a stigma around affordable housing. And it's historically been, you say affordable housing, you think projects, right? You think government subsidies. You think people who are basically living in homeless shelters, these sort of things. But look, and maybe we need another word for it, because there's a gulf here of affordable of what the market needs in terms of affordable housing. Because there's this basically gap between what we would say the typical affordable housing that I just mentioned and what the reality of the situation is. What is really affordable anymore? You know, you come out of college, you get a job making $40,000 a year, and your rent in Houston over here, it's $2,000 a month. Maybe if you go a little further out, it's $1,500 a month. Is that affordable if you're making 40 grand a year, you know, gross? So I think that the approach of it has always been just on this lower end, and it's always been maybe kind of the local municipalities and things kind of addressing some of it, but a lot of, you know, people don't want their taxes spent on that. So I think it's going to be, like I said, early is mom and pops and concepts like Padsplit that are going to bridge that gap between, you know, what we understand affordable housing to be and what it really actually is, and is getting the gap is getting wider and wider, and being able to kind of fill that in, because the people that are living in Padsplits, these are people that are hardworking individuals, right? They're educated. It is not anything other than the fact that there's not a better affordable solution. It's not the old kind of standbys of why we need affordable housing. I think that it's, you know, to answer the question kind of and wrapping a bow on it, it's a whole new approach to a whole new problem.
Thank you so much.
I'll say. Yeah.
I mean, I can't thank you both enough for coming onto this podcast, but most importantly, helping me dispel the myth around affordable housing, dispel the stigma, because I know that this is going to be a lifetime battle, because that's how hard it is to get through it when you have so many years of entrenched stigma and perception what affordable housing is. So I can't thank you both enough for coming onto the podcast, sharing a wealth of knowledge around the Houston market, because for all those people that might be scared of investing out of state, you just had someone literally give you $1 million value conversation from not only the Padsplit, but also a local expertise, so that you understand where to potentially invest that might give you the best chance of success. Now, again, this is not investment advice. Full disclaimer, there's not solicitation for investments. But this is who you need on your team to succeed. And I am so blessed to have met the both of you. And like, I just feel so incredibly, I'm just in awe that you guys volunteered your time to come onto the podcast to share this information with our audience so that they can have their best chance of succeeding. So thank you both so much.
Thank you so much as well. It's always, you know, it's a pleasure to talk with you. And I so appreciate you helping to spread the word, because you're right. It is it's a mind shift. And if, you know, you've never, like, I didn't know before I worked at Padsplit, honestly, that you could have a full-time job and not have a safe place to live. I wasn't aware. And now that I'm aware, it's like, I want to just scream it from the rooftop. So thank you for writing the platform to help educate people, and for people that want to be part of the solution, giving them, you know, ways to be part of the solution.
Yeah, Ken. I mean, look, thank you I will take this time, you know, I'm a huge proponent of Padsplits, but what you are doing specifically, brother, I mean, you are a trailblazer, man. You absolutely are. And your intensity towards this is, man, it's humbling. I can tell you that. Man. So thank you. And, you know, from the bottom of my heart, being able to do this with one of my favorite people on the planet, Blake. Go
Braves.
I take that back. This is all done.
No, seriously, guys, thank you so much for those kind words. When we first started this podcast, we had no idea whether or not people would even want to listen to this stuff. And, you know, there were plenty of times that I thought about quitting, but I'm so glad the momentum kept bringing us forward, and I kept meeting amazing people like you guys that also equally are vested and want to fight this fight. So thank you so much. Ryan, if people want to reach out to you, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can email me directly, Ryan at Passive Investor, or you want to email my team, info@passiveinvestor.net.
Amazing. And Blake, how would people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about Padsplit?
Check out the referral link below. Here's my Instagram handle. Also, You can reach out to me at Blake, BLAKE, at padsplit.com. And just let me know how you heard about me, and I'll get you to the top of my line to have a meeting and dig in.
Awesome. All right. This has been an amazing conversation. I can't wait to get some properties in Houston. And then maybe we can just come on. We can do a case study with the audience members, with the both of you on, just talk about, hey, let's see how much growth there has been in 6 months, 12 months. And that can give a real tangible example to the audience. So thank you so much. And we are out.
Awesome. Thanks, Kent.